I'm going to go back now to activity 10C, and in terms of Magna Carta, this was a legal act in Great Britain that prevented the king from wrongly imprisoning freemen at the time, and this was I'm going to start up with activity 10C, and in terms of Magna Carta, this was a restriction on the King of England as of the year 1215 and years following from wrongly imprisoning his enemies without trial. And so there was this requirement that anyone who was imprisoned, if it was not as a result of being found guilty by a jury of his peers, a judge could issue a writ of habeas corpus and then examine the case. I've added this quotation from the Habeas Corpus Act, especially to bring in to bear on the Guantanamo Bay cases that we have talked a little bit about the United States detaining people without trial. This quotation makes it very clear that the writ of habeas corpus is for citizens only. It says that, it talks about great delays having been used by sheriffs and jailers, to whose custody the king's subjects have been committed. So this tradition of ours is that citizens who have been wrongly imprisoned have this access to the courts. So let me just point out that this right of personal liberty, as we're looking at it, of a government wrongly imprisoning people, this is a subset of the second meaning of liberty, living under a government that does not harm its citizens. It's living under a government that does not deprive its citizens of the right of personal liberty. So the goal of liberty is to establish a government that will protect our person and property, but will not then turn against us and start harming its own citizens. And so from the perspective of liberty, only citizens have this access to habeas corpus for us to be free. It's not for non-citizens who are launching attacks against the United States. Now, from the point of view of just pure justice and making sure that the United States does not commit wrongs against innocent people, there may be some sense in having some sort of trial or a military tribunal or something of that sort. Now, looked at from the point of view of liberty, though, we're just talking about government harming its citizens. In letter D, you can see two parts of the U.S. Constitution that guard American citizens from our federal government and state government in terms of this right of liberty. In the Fifth Amendment, it says, no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. This means that the federal government cannot execute, imprison, or fine us unless we've been found guilty of a crime in a court of law. And it's that word liberty there in the middle of those three rights that refers to wrongful imprisonment. You know, we can't be deprived of our freedom from physical restraints. And the 14th Amendment refers to the state governments not being able to do those things to us as well. If you go to activity 11, this activity was designed just to illustrate the way tyrannical governments operate by just getting rid of their opponents, just getting them out of the picture, not necessarily by executing them directly with a bullet shot in the head, but sometimes it's just as in letter A, in the case of the former Soviet Union, sending them off to Siberia, some far-off place where they're in a prison camp, and as you can see here, often dying because of the conditions, because of the hard work or the cold, the lack of food, etc. China, Cuba, North Korea, these are other examples of countries that are tyrannies in the sense that they harm their citizens just for being opponents. You know, we see in our political system that there's arguments between the two parties, but when the Democratic Party is in power, as it is now, President Obama does not imprison all the Republicans. There's reasoned, hopefully, arguments against each other's positions, but you don't just put your opponents in jail. And when Republicans are in power, they don't put Democrats in jail. Whereas in these countries, if you oppose the government and you pose a threat to their staying in power because they're not elected, then you find yourself in some dark prison off somewhere, or a psychiatric hospital, and that's how these governments stay in power. They just put their opponents in prison. In Activity 12, that's your liberty analysis. And your question here is always, is the government in question wrongfully imprisoning anybody, meaning are they putting someone in prison without a trial? And in particular, as we'll see in, I think, letter D, are they putting a citizen in jail without a trial? So in letter A, Texas versus Johnson, this case is about someone burning a flag, the free choice to do that. It's not a wrongful imprisonment case. So no one's being wrongly imprisoned without a trial. Therefore, this meaning of liberty does not apply to Texas versus Johnson. Same in the case of the Planned Parenthood versus Casey. This is a free choice case pertaining to abortion. No one's being wrongly imprisoned by the state of Pennsylvania here. Nobody's being put in jail without due process, therefore meaning a trial. So it also does not apply. Same with Stenberg versus Carr. This is about late-term abortions. It's an abortion case. It's about freedom of choice, personal choice. It's also about whether or not you're harming, whether a physician is harming an innocent person by performing this abortion. It's not a freedom from physical restraint case. Nobody's being wrongly imprisoned here, so it does not apply. Now, letter D is much more relevant to this meaning of liberty. Boumediene is another person who was captured in Afghanistan. A number of folks after 9/11 went from around the world, from Australia, from many countries around the world to fight against U.S. forces when we went there to get rid of the Taliban, and many people were captured during that conflict, and a lot of them were brought to Guantanamo Bay. Now, in the case of Boumediene versus Bush, if you're just talking about liberty in terms of this meaning of liberty and putting in the context of government not harming its citizens, it does not apply because Boumediene is not a citizen. It's not a case of a government harming its own citizen. Now, if you're concerned about Boumediene's innocence, which is a valid concern, you would want some kind of checking to see if he's really who we think he is and really dangerous. So there were military tribunals that heard his case, that considered his case, and decided he was in fact dangerous and involved in Al-Qaeda and needed to stay detained. Whether or not he needs a trial in federal court to determine his innocence is another question where there's been a lot of back and forth between Congress and the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has ultimately decided that he does, even though he's not a citizen, need to have a hearing in federal court. But this is still kind of a new area of law for us, and a lot of the details are still being worked out. But again, just in terms of liberty, this case does not apply because Boumediene's